Do you know? When you are young, you are deathly afraid of silence. We see it as an empty pit, a dead space that must be buried under layers and layers of sound. We spend the first half of our lives trying to fill every gap with noise, as if volume were a measure of our importance in the world. Words, loud music, promises tossed into the wind, arguments for the simple pleasure of winning. We blindly believe that if we stop talking, the world will stop, or worse yet, that we will be left alone with our own thoughts, and that is the one appointment we avoid most. I was exactly like that. I remember when I met Julian. We were barely 20 years old, and I lived under the dictatorship of constant expression. To me, back then, love was a wildfire of words. It was an endless stream of chatter. I wanted him to tell me he loved me every 5 minutes, not because I doubted it, but because I needed the sound of his voice to confirm my own existence. I wanted us to make plans out loud, to shout our goals from the rooftops, to design our future with complex sentences and grand declarations. If Julian stayed quiet while we walked through the park, staring at the horizon, I felt a shiver of anxiety. "What are you thinking about?" I would always ask him, with that almost violent insistence of someone who believes silence is a wall that separates us. It terrified me to think that in his silences, he was far away from me, that there was a room in his mind where I didn't have a key. How wrong I was. I spent years believing that to connect with a human being, you had to build bridges of complicated phrases, when the truth is that the sturdiest bridge, the one that doesn't collapse in a storm, is the one built when there is no longer a need to say anything at all. The noise of youth is a noise of insecurity. We speak so that no one notices we don't know who we are. We shout to convince others that we are right, when in reality, we are only trying to convince ourselves. Back then, I didn't know that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of a peace that doesn't need to be explained. Julian, with his eternal calm, was my first teacher in this language that doesn't use an alphabet. But it took me decades to understand the first lesson. Life has a curious and sometimes cruel way of turning down the volume for you. By 40, my house was a constant, out-of-tune orchestra. It was full of noises, children running down the hallway, the television blaring cartoons, the phone ringing with work emergencies, the sound of plates clattering in the kitchen. It was a happy noise. Don't get me wrong, but it was an exhausting noise. In that stage of my life, silence was a luxury item, something you saw in the shop windows of your dreams but couldn't afford to buy. But then, life got serious. Life stopped playing games and showed us its soberest face. There was a year, a gray year, one of those that seems to have no seasons. My mother became gravely ill, one of those illnesses that forces you to watch the clock with fear every night. And shortly after, as if fate wanted to test us, Julian lost his job at the factory after 15 years of loyalty. The world, as we knew it, collapsed upon us. The ground vanished beneath our feet. I remember one night in particular. It was 3 a.m, and the house was plunged into that darkness found only in the deepest hours of the dawn. We couldn't sleep. We found each other in the kitchen, drawn by the dim, flickering light of the open refrigerator. We sat at the wooden table, opposite each other. We were exhausted. We had no solutions. There were no magic words that could pay the accumulated bills, no self-help phrases that could restore my mother's health. In other times, in my noisy youth, I would have cried until I was dry. I would have screamed against the injustice, demanded answers from heaven, or blamed Julian for not having a plan B. I would have filled the kitchen with complaints and laments. But that night, something in me had broken. Or perhaps it had simply matured. We just sat there in the shadows. He didn't try to comfort me with a white lie. He simply placed his hand over mine. His fingers were rough, but his touch was firm. 10, 20, 30 minutes passed. We didn't say a single word. We only listened to the dripping of the faucet and our own breathing. And in that absolute silence, for the first time in my life, I felt that our souls were truly speaking to each other without the hindrance of vocal cords. Silence was not a terrifying void, it was a safety net that held us both. It was him telling me, through the pulse of his hand, I am here, and that is enough to keep going. It was then that I learned that words are sometimes just decoration, wrapping paper that often hides an empty package. Real love, the kind that survives the winter and the hunger, is what remains when you run out of things to say. It is the ability to hold the other's anguish without trying to cover it up with noise. I learned that when the pain is too great, words become small, ridiculous, almost an insult. Only silence has the stature to accompany true sadness and also true strength. Look at those books behind me. You see them there, lined up with their spines worn by time and use. Each one of them is a voice, a thought, a cry, or a whisper from someone who is no longer here. But I'll tell you a secret. The most valuable thing about this library is not what is written in black ink on yellowed paper. The most valuable thing is the silence that exists between the pages while I read them. Here, in this chair, I have spent the most beautiful afternoons of my old age inhabiting that quiet space where my imagination and the author's imagination meet without making a sound. The people of today. I feel a bit of pity for them, if I'm honest. I don't say it with arrogance, but with a profound sadness. I see young people in the park, and even adults, all connected to their devices, with their headphones on like shields, fleeing from silence as if it were a monster that will devour them the moment they unplug. They are constantly feeding their ears with podcasts, music, videos, or the voices of strangers. They are terrified of hearing the beating of their own hearts. They don't realize that silence is a mirror of brutal honesty. If you stay quiet, you begin to see yourself as you really are, without the filters of social conversation. And it seems that nowadays, no one wants to see their own reflection. But if you cannot be in silence with yourself, if you need constant noise so as not to hear yourself, you will never truly be with anyone else. You will be with them, yes, but it will only be an exchange of sounds, not a union of essences. Sometimes my grandchildren come to see me. They come in like a whirlwind of energy, talking about their apps, their social media dramas, problems that seem urgent but are as fleeting as smoke. I listen to them, of course. I love them, and I'm interested in every word that comes out of their mouths. But every now and then, when I notice they are too accelerated, I manage to get them to sit with me here, in front of the window, just as the sun begins to set and the shadows lengthen across the garden. I propose a game to them, though they think it's a challenge. Let's see who can last the longest listening only to the wind in the pines. At first they get nervous. They move in their chairs, they scratch their heads, they glance sideways at their mobile phones vibrating in their pockets. The silence itches. It makes them uncomfortable, like a poorly cut clothing label. But after a while, something happens. It's almost a physical phenomenon. Their shoulders drop. Their breathing, which was short and fast, becomes deep and rhythmic. And suddenly, when they open their eyes, I see them looking at me in a different way. It is at that exact moment when we truly connect. Not because of what they tell me about their school or their friends, but because we are sharing the same air, the same instant of pure existence. In that minute of shared silence, they learn more about me and I about them than in 1,000 hours of superficial talk. They learn that my house is not empty, but full of a peace they can also possess if they only dare to be still. Julian left 7 years ago. The first few months after his passing, the silence in this house was not peace. It was a constant thunder that hurt my ears. It was a silence that screamed his name. It was unbearable for me to walk into the rooms and not hear his gravelly cough upon waking, the rustle of the newspaper as he turned the page, or the metallic clinking of his teaspoon hitting the porcelain cup every morning. Those noises were the metronome of my life. And when they stopped, I felt as if I had run out of rhythm too. I walked through the house, turning on the radio, the television. I even talked to myself just to break that stillness that reminded me every second that he was gone. Silence was the enemy, the reminder of death. But one day, while I was sitting right here, tired of running, I gave up. I turned everything off. I let the silence wrap around me completely, like a heavy blanket. And then I realized something wonderful, something that changed my morning forever. The silence was not his absence. The silence was, in reality, the place where he still lived. I realized that if I filled my house with constant noise just to not feel alone, what I was doing was kicking him out of here. Because it is in the silence where I can remember the exact tone of his laughter when something truly made him laugh. It is in the silence where I can feel, almost physically, the warmth of his hand on my shoulder when I am worried. It is in the quiet where his memory becomes sharp, without the interferences of the present. I learned that the language of silence is the only language powerful enough to cross the border between life and whatever comes next. It is a radio frequency that can only be tuned when the world's dial is at 0. It doesn't use the alphabet or grammar or rules of syntax. It uses the pure memory of the heart. Now, when I am alone, I don't feel alone. I am inhabiting a shared space with all those I loved who no longer have bodies. Silence is the bridge that allows me to continue conversing with Julian, not with words, but with the essence of who we were and still are. So, if you want a piece of advice from this old woman who has seen the sun set thousands of times and who has learned not to fear the shadows, find someone you can be in silence with. That is the litmus test for any relationship, whether it's friendship or love. Look for friends you can walk with for an entire hour through the countryside or through a noisy city without feeling the neurotic obligation to fill the air with nonsense or banal comments just to avoid discomfort. Look for a partner who understands, without you having to explain it, that an "I love you" said with the eyes in the middle of a mute breakfast while the sun comes through the window and the coffee steams is worth much more than 1,000 poems shouted from a stage. Shared silence is the maximum trust two human beings can reach. It is saying, I don't need to perform for you. I don't need to convince you of anything. I am simply here with you. And above all, the most important thing of everything I've told you today, learn to be your own silence. Do not be afraid of yourself. Do not run away from what is inside you with cheap distractions and incessant noises. Inside you, there is an entire garden, a universe of thoughts, desires, and truths waiting to be heard. But the flowers of the soul do not grow where there is too much din. They need the dew of stillness to open. The peace you see in my eyes today, at 80 years old, is not because my life was a path of roses or a smooth sail. My life was hard, it was noisy, it was chaotic, and at times, terribly violent in its changes. I had losses, I had fears, and I had nights of desperate screams. But at the end of it all, after so much noise, I learned the most valuable lesson. I learned to turn down the volume of the world so I could listen to the music that plays when everything else goes quiet. It is a subtle music, but it is the most beautiful music there is. Now look at me. Don't say anything. You don't need to find a clever answer or a phrase of gratitude. Just stay there for a moment with me. Watch how the light comes through that window, how the dust motes dance in the air, how the world follows its course without the need for our words. Do you feel it? That little tingle in your chest? That sensation that time has stopped for an instant and that you are, finally, present in your own body? What you feel now? That is real life. And to understand it, we haven't needed to say a single word.